Dean Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, the Biafran legend and leader of his people.
And in course of my taking brief here in the university, I discovered the great gap that Dean Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu was not placed in our academic activities in the university. Hence, I made a proposal to have him on the university academic calendar by instituting a memorial lecture in his honor. The university senate. Today's lecture being the first is to lay the background for subsequent lectures in the future. In the future, we intend to focus on socio-economic and political issues which may be national or international in nature. Today's lecture will be on that man of history, theme Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu. Once more, on behalf of the University Governing Council, the Senate, the staff, and students, I welcome all our guests to Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu University, Anambra State.
Ojukwu was a David who had battled against a menacing Goliath called Nigeria. For the safety and survival of his people, he was a superhuman who did for the benefit of his people, but was subdued by a combination of forces too rich for any man or society to withstand.
I've come only to make 2 points. The first is a gratitude to the university, the Chukwuemeka Odumegwu University, for thinking it fit, for the presence of mind, to organize the first memorial lecture. We often celebrate only the dead, and I only hope that someday we'll begin to celebrate also the living. The man Ojukwu himself is an encyclopedia.
Professor Chidi Odinkalu is a senior team manager and head African program of the Open Society Justice Initiative. Based in Abuja office, Odinkalu is a lawyer and advocate from Nigeria. For 4 years until 7 December 2015, he chaired the Governing Council of Nigeria's National Human Rights Commission. In 2015, Odinkalu was elected a senior fellow of the Nigerian Leadership Institute. A leading African news weekly described him as a leading member of the new generation of African legal minds. An Oxford University's Ike Okonta called him one of Africa's leading human rights lawyers. He has extensive networks across Africa, built up over several years of working of human rights and social justice on the continent. He is associated with several non-governmental and academic institutions within and outside Africa. Among other affiliations, Professor Odinkalu is a member of the Human Rights Advisory Council of the Carnegie Council on Ethics and International Affairs, of the Board of the Fund for Global Human Rights, and of the Integrity Organization in Nigeria. Professor Odinkalu is also the chairman of the Board of Directors of the International Refugee Rights Initiative in New York. He also chairs the International Advisory Board of Global Rights. Professor Odinkalu received his PhD in law from the London School of Economics and Political Science, LSE, with a thesis on the institutional laws of regionalism and regional integration in Africa. He took his LLM from the University of Lagos and his LLB in law from the Imo State University. In 1988, he graduated from the Nigerian Law School as the winner of the Chief Rotimi Williams and Sir Danley Alexandra Prizes in legal drafting and conveyancing. He was also the best graduating student in the School of Legal Studies of Imo State University in 1987. Professor Odinkalu did his high school education at the Federal Government College, Okigwe, from where he graduated in 1983 as the best student in history, geography, and in statistics. For 2 years, from April 2016 to April 2018, he was the President General of the Unity Schools Old Students Association, the umbrella alumni association of old students and old girls associations of the 104 federal government and federal government girls colleges, including King's College and Queen's College, both in Lagos. His leadership and administrative experience and achievements. Prior to joining the staff of Open Society Justice Initiative, Professor Odinkalu was at different times senior legal officer responsible for Africa and Middle East at the International Center for the Legal Protection of Human Rights in London, human rights advisor to the United Nations Observer Mission in Sierra Leone, and Brandeis International Fellow at the Center for Ethics, Justice, and Public Life for Brandeis University, Waltham, Massachusetts. He was also the Deputy National Secretary of Nigeria's pioneer human rights organization, the Civil Liberties Organization, CLO. At the Nigerian Bar Association, Professor Odinkalu is the founder of the section on public interest and development of the Nigerian Bar Association. For 4 years between 2006 to 2010, he was coordinator of SPIDO. In 2017 to 18, he served as the chairman of the section. Odinkalu was also a member of the National Committee, NEC, of the NBA from 2006 to August 2018. Beyond Nigeria, Professor Odinkalu is the founder of the Coalition of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, located in Arusha, Tanzania. He is also co-chairperson of the Sudan Consortium, headquartered in Kampala, Uganda, which works on addressing mass atrocities in Sudan and South Sudan. Professor Odinkalu was Jeremiah Smith Junior Lecturer in Laws at the Harvard Law School, Waltham, Massachusetts. He was also previously Commonwealth Young Lawyers Fellow at the University of London and has previously served as trustee of the International African Institute at the same university. He is presently also Senior Fellow at the Center for the Study of Human Rights at the LSE and visiting professor, Center for International Criminal Law at the Open University of Tanzania. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Professor Odinkalu has published 6 books and monographs and over 50 articles in legal journals and books on diverse subjects of international law, international economic and human rights law, public policy and political economy affecting African countries, including justice denied, area courts in the northern states of Nigeria, and why more Africans don't use rights language. He is frequently called upon to advise multilateral and bilateral institutions on African-related policy, including the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa and the African Union, the Economic Community of West African ECOWAS, and the World Economic Forum. His latest book with Arisha Osiri is Too Good to Die, Thought Time and the Myth of the Indispensable Man in Africa. Professor Odinkalu is a knowledgeable scholar, incisive, dynamic, indefatigable teacher and researcher whose time-honored contributions to the academia and humanity will stand the test of time. This lecture will widen our knowledge on the legacy of Dean Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, the great hero of our time. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the lecturer, Professor Chidi Odinkalu.
The chairperson, Odenibu, Nukuwanne Mwoke, Ekenem. The visitor, ably represented today by His Excellency, the Deputy Governor of Anambra State, Her Excellency, Iyom Bianca Ono. Iyom Bianca Ono. We know who we address. The university management, can I please respectfully apply to the chair to abide by existing protocols and just make one exception. Great eagles and falcons. Oh no, no, whatever. Okay, I'd like to hear you. Greatest eagles and falcons. Now join me. The greatest of 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 the greatest eagles and falcons. Ikemba kaigeso. Ikemba kaigeso. Ikemba kaigeso. One more time. Ikemba kaigeso. Good afternoon. I am Mother Never. I should start with an apology. At this time of the day, our physiology is constructed in a manner that does not actually lend itself to bursts of heavy energy. We are actually downsizing in terms of... But that's where we are. And so I neither wish to afflict anybody with something too prolix. There is a paper, it has been filed, and I wish to seek the leave of the chairperson to get it into the records. Can I also, in the same spirit, apply to the chairperson to adopt everything that has been said here today as my views, so that what I will be saying will only be to supplement what has been said. I will take the paper as read, and for those who have not read it, I will suggest in your spare time you can take a look at it. Because we are running short of time, what I propose to do is to, first of all, introduce what I'd wish to say. To
introduce you to the structure and organizing framework for what we propose to do, and then to highlight different parts of the presentation. I will read parts of the introduction, I may read parts of the end, the conclusion, and I would seek leave of the chairperson to then deliver all of that to your bedrooms in the hard copies that you've got here. Today, and you've not made a post about this on your social media wall or handle, you are failing the man and generation after whom this university is founded. If this were happening in Yoruba land or in the north, they would occupy our consciousness with it. It's not yet too late. What's the hashtag for this event? It doesn't exist, so we're going to create one. Hashtag Ikemba at 85 or hashtag Ojukwu at 85. Start tweeting, start posting, start WhatsApping, start communicating with the rest of the world. Do you get me? For the students here, repeat after me or say to yourself, hashtag Ikemba at 85. Hashtag Ojukwu at 85. Go for it, contest those spaces. Because the hunting of Ndibo did not stop in 1966 or 1970. If you go on Nigerian social media today, you'll still see that going on. It is only by contesting that space vigorously that we will be able to show that we are a people with dignity. And that's really what I want to start with. Let me also say this. When I was asked to do this, and it's interesting that Odenibo has confessed that he's the person that put me in this trouble. Because this is trouble. I actually, the first person I spoke to was my 14-year-old daughter, and I asked her, what do you know about Ikemba? He told me Civil War. I asked people from this part, different generations, but also outside this part of the world. The only thing people said was Civil War, which is quite tragic, but also part of the reason why this lecture series must be sustained and must be promoted. Yesterday, I did a tweet. Yesterday, if Ikemba had been alive, he would have been 85. I did just one tweet. On this day in 1933, Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu was born. He was the first quartermaster general of the Nigerian army. Do you know, nearly everybody on my handle did not know this. They wanted to deny that part of history. That is why this is important, and that is why all of you here who are in contact with social media have to contest that space. Because there are lots of things people don't know and don't want to know. Now, the title of this is The Force of Reason and Reason for Force. And there is a good reason for that. It means that this lecture is in two dimensions. The force of reason is logics and analysis. Reason for force, actually, historically in Nigeria, has laid in our narratives and contested histories, oral histories, written histories, memoirs, and the lot, of failed or limited or contested relationships between the various communities that make up Nigeria. 379 ethnic and national groups, over 4,000 linguistic groups and dialects. That's a heck of a lot of people justing for space in this country. As a result, this lecture is a little bit about historical narratives, a little bit about analytics and logic, and some feeling may also come into it. And I think it's important that we start by acknowledging all of that and respecting every point of view that will be thrown up, not just today, but as the series unfolds over the next few years. I'm a guinea pig only. And as a guinea pig, I'm happy to take my punishment at this particular setting. My hope is that lots of people more qualified than I am, I see or heard Chuksi Lebunam was here, will do justice as to the man, the subject matter, and our histories as we proceed. I'm not a historian. I'm an amateur at best in that area. I'm not good at anything. And I really would like to be here as a precursor to greater events to come. Now, what's the structure? First of all, I want to start by thanking the government and people of Anambra State. This is a very courageous thing they've done. They did in 2014 by memorializing Emeka Odumegwu Ojukwu in this university. Because what they've done is to honor history and to challenge us to recover our memories. There are lots of buried memories from the Civil War. And we have a duty to recover them. Not just because that celebrates our greatness and the greatness of our people, but because also younger people will learn from it and future generations can learn from the mistakes and the greatnesses of our past. Now, of course, that means we've got to be honest, we've got to be rigorous sometimes, because memory is a bit of a shrine and a bit of a difficult place to navigate. Sometimes we may discover things we were not prepared for. But we should not disavow memory just because we find out things we don't like. But because things we like and things we don't like coexist in the ecosystem of memory and of history. And we've got to be honest enough about those. Now, I will, after doing that, I have some introductions and I want to plead, I have a mitigation plea. I will set a bit of context with some concepts on what legacy is about. I want to illustrate 5 dimensions of the legacy of the late Emeka Odumegwu Ojukwu. One is about his patriotism, his leadership, and the politicization of the army in Nigeria, because our army was politicized in 1966. Number 2, I would like to illustrate or bring to the floor here issues about the politics of state creation, coexistence, and internal territorialization in Nigeria. Number 3, there will be a few points you will see made about political and military strategy and how we all must take collective ownership of those in this part of our region, our country. Number 4, regionalism, regional integration, and self-determination, because right now we've got a resurgence of self-determination advocacies, not just here in the Southeast, but all over the country. And fifthly, there is the humanitarianism, because global humanitarianism was redefined by the Nigerian Civil War. And then I'll conclude. I'd like to take that in about 20-25 minutes. Now, that really is what we'd like to lay out as what we'd like to do. Of course, it's difficult to do this because we are dealing with a man and memory of tremendous polarity and contradiction. Ikemba was a polyglot. He spoke Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, English, French, and Iyomia may tell us a few other languages too. And he spoke them better than the owners of those languages. Sam Aluko did testify that he spoke Yoruba better than him. Sarkin Kano, Ado Bayero said he spoke Hausa better than him. And some of you may remember that when Ikemba was buried in 2012, Ado Bayero had a terminal illness, but he came down to attend the burial. Right or wrong? And nobody, how many of you bothered to ask, why did this dying man come down? And yet, people will say he had an ambiguous relationship with Nigeria, notwithstanding the fact that some of his closest relationships were actually outside Igbo land. Now, he was a self-confessed elitist, but he had a popular touch. A voluble humanist, and yet he fought a war in which a lot of ordinary people perished. He was a war leader. but nevertheless found war regrettable. These are his words. I'm not putting words in his mouth. And he didn't like personality cults, and yet we have a personality cult built around him. He was a man of tremendous brilliance and learning, and yet he did make some serious errors. He is celebrated by contemporary advocates of Igbo exceptionalism, and yet he wrote, and I quote, that Igbo exceptionalism, that to seek to found an Igbo political party was constitutionally invalid, and that it is politically lunacy to do so. He was a romantic, if you remember, and yet Odial Femu could accuse him of having no dreams for the Igbos. Who is a romantic except someone who nurtures dreams? And interestingly, this was an Igbo man who led Igbo people in war but had a daughter from the north. And he fought against a man from the north who had a son from the southeast. I don't know whether any of you knows that Gowon had a son, Musa, from Wadani. In the heart of the war, he was born in 1968 actually, in the heart of the war. And I just wonder, this is a matter for just speculation. If everybody had known that Ojukwu had a daughter from the north and Gowon had a daughter from the east, would we have fought the war? It's a question that kind of theater allows us to pose. Because these are questions that we no longer want to put on the table. But they are facts that we will not allow to get away. And it's not just that. Emeka Ojukwu went into exile in January 1970. 5 years later, in July 1975, Gowon went into exile. For reasons not dissimilar to the reasons for which Ojukwu went into exile. Gowon's people in the north had been massacred by precisely the logics that were triggered by the state creation exercise in 1967, on 27th of May 1967. Those were the logics that ultimately drove Gowon into exile. Because in 1966, when Gowon took over, he was the most senior officer from northern Nigeria. By July 1975, when he went into exile, Gowon had become a senior officer from the Middle Belt. He was no longer from northern Nigeria. Yakubu Gowon, sorry, Yakubu Danjuma, TY, who was one of the leaders of the counter coup in 1966, July, was a northerner when he did that coup. Hello? Today, T.Y. Danjuma is a Christian from Taraba State. I don't know whether you get my drift. The issues over which those tumultuous events of 1966 happened have not gone away. Even worse, they have consumed many of the people who were on the other side. And that's why it is important that we do not come here to sit as arbiters in the controversies over the life of Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, because those controversies will outlive us. Time is playing a role in how those controversies evolve. And so my hope is that for this university and its students, the issue really is that this lecture series will celebrate something that the man himself said and wrote down. And that is that we are here to convince and not to cajole. We are here to debate and not to decry. We are here to persuade rather than to pervert. I have quoted Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu.